Hello, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so I have a tendency to talk in places like this, trying to project over it. So if at any point I blow out your eardrums, I am very sorry. I'm gonna try not to yell into this thing, but it's taking everything that I have not to do it. I'll also say that usually I have difficulty fitting an FMPerception demo into an hour, and we've got 30 minutes. So I'm gonna be going pretty quickly, not taking a lot of questions, but if you have questions or want to see anything else in more detail, the Geist interactive booth is literally right behind us, and I'll be available to chat after and for the rest of the day, okay? So, FMPerception, a tool that allows you to see what's going on in your system to a high degree of detail and do it very, very quickly, okay? I like to think in terms of what does it take to take somebody who's good at development and make them great at development? And the first thing to me is confidence. So that when you're making a change, well, confidence and precision. When you're making a change, that you know that the change that you're making isn't going to have problems down the line. You're not causing new issues, you're not breaking something while you're fixing something else. And the other thing is staying in the zone. Having the ability to make a series of changes, and we load our brains with a bunch of stuff about the current problem that we're dealing with, and if we can get the whole thing solved before we have to unload that, that's going to make you faster and more accurate. And so that's really what FMPerception is about doing. And it does this in two ways. I'll go right into the demo. It does this in two ways. The first thing is, unlike classic FileMaker analysis tools, FMPerception is not a FileMaker database. It's native code. So the Mac version was written in Swift from the ground up, and the Windows version was rewritten in C# from the ground up. Native code, native tools, a completely independent app from FileMaker. And the second thing that it does is on-demand parsing of the XML. So the FileMaker-based systems, the first thing you do when you do an import is it slices your DDR up into 1,000 little chunks and loads those into tables, so that when you're ready to ask a question, it already knows the answer, but there's a long time delay there. FMPerception will load the DDR into RAM and then stop, waiting for you to ask a question, and then it will load just the portions of the DDR that it needs to in order to answer that question, and ignores everything else. So let's do one. Oh, I just stepped on the tablecloth. Let's start with, this is FM Starting Point. It's a publicly available solution done by Rich Carlton Consulting. Not the biggest system, by no means the smallest system. It's got a fair amount of complexity. And so I'm going to generate a DDR. Let's go Database Design Report. XML, and I'm going to tell it to automatically open the report when it's done, which you normally don't want to do with an XML DDR, but since FMPerception is a native application, I've set it as the default handler for .xml files. So when I double-click a summary.xml, it immediately will open in FMPerception. So the slowest part of the process of loading a DDR into FMPerception is the DDR export process. That's where all the time is. Done. DDR is loaded. As I said, that's just loaded into RAM. So when I go here, let's close that out, and say, tell me about the tables in this system. Right now, FMPerception doesn't know anything about the tables. Nothing at all, until I click this. Now it's loaded the data. It's about 300 XML queries to get that information, because it didn't just get the list of tables, it got the count of the fields and the count of the TOs from the relationship graph, including the names of all the table occurrences. There. So let's look at a test case. Someone has told me that they need to add a new value to the pop-up list for the possible project statuses. And unfortunately, the status that they've selected is to be determined, really wide. Do I have room for that every place? And how long is it going to take me to make this change everywhere that it needs to be made? So let's do it. I'm going to use this filter here, find the projects table. I will go to fields. I will find the status field and say, what layouts is it on? And here are the 23 different places this field appears on a layout. So from the end of DDR export to having this answer is about 3 seconds if you know where you're going. If that's all I need to solve this problem and do it accurately, I'm right back into it. I didn't lose my train of thought. I asked a question and immediately had the answer. This is the usage loop that FMPerception is optimized for. Is I have a question, get me back to work as fast as humanly possible. So, tables, fields, here's all the layouts in the system. Let's sort them by the number of objects on the layout. And 660 objects, here's all the objects on the layout. Now, in order to place these fields on this layout, how many relational steps away are those fields from the base table occurrence of that layout? If this number says 9, you've got an opportunity to do some improvement. You know, make some special TOs just for getting the data to the right places, or maybe use some execute SQL. But you can identify this very quickly. If you are optimizing for WebDirect, get your object counts down, but once you've done that, you really need to clean up your CSS. So we can quickly see that this particular object here has 25 overridden CSS nodes. Huge opportunity to make a new style that you can apply to this and similar objects, and you'll get a performance bump in WebDirect. You also see scripts, and so here's a count of all the steps in the scripts. Here's active steps, here's those inactive or commented out steps, and here's the total steps of comments in each of those scripts. So if I'm looking at the work of a junior developer, and I want to know whether they're keeping up with our standards, I can sort this by active steps, or rather, let's sort by inactive steps. Here's 37 active steps with 129 steps that have been commented out and just left there. There's some cruft, there's some cleanup that somebody could do to make this a little bit more manageable. But let's also look here and notice that this is a 122-line script with only one comment. I'm going to go back to that junior developer and say, let's put a little more in there. How many of you have complex script structures? One script calling another script, calling other scripts, and it branches and comes back, particularly those on-open scripts that call 30 other scripts, that call 200 other things, all for getting the system set up. Let's take a look at one of them. And I want to see all of that charted out. And so I can just bring up the call chain diagram. And here's all the scripts in the order they're called. And note that this script right here actually appears in multiple places. You can see the bold shift. It appears in multiple places in the chain. You can get to this script through multiple paths. Now, this is the one that I'm really interested in, this 0028. I want to see the same call chain diagram from the perspective of that script. Well, this is navigable, so I just click on this script, and it's just like I had selected it from the list of scripts. And now I can click the call chain diagram and get a new diagram from the perspective of that script. And again, a couple of seconds. If this is where you're going, how does this flow? Anybody ever sat down with a pad and paper and tried to map out how the scripts flow? We've all done it. It's a nightmare. So this, let me expand this a little bit. By the way, I've been doing little adjustments along the way, and this is one of the things that you get from being a native application. I can do things like reorder columns. I can, every column has sort. I can resize sections depending upon what I want to display. And so you can actually subtly alter the FMPerception interface to optimize for whatever your current task is. So let's look here. This is standard script steps. So what this does is it looks at every single script step in the entire system and groups them up by step type, and then shows you how often each one is used. And so when FileMaker does something like alter the functionality of the new window script step to carry an implicit go to layout, I can just run a quick filter here. Here's new window. I double click on that, and here's all 109 places that I use the new window script step. If instead that's 3,000, I'm probably not going to immediately go in and start messing with these. Now, let's say that I want to go through these and kind of work with them and do some work on each one. I'm a FileMaker developer by training. And so my question is always, just give me the data. And so I didn't put checklist functionality in FMPerception. What I did was make it so that anytime you get data down here, you can just say export results to CSV. It exports a CSV with column headers. Drop that into FileMaker. Add 5 checkboxes in a date field, or whatever you want to do to manage your process while working through those things. You can dump the data out to someplace else and do whatever you want with it. Drill back. So plugin script steps, plugin functions. Standard functions does the same thing as standard steps, except with all the calculation functions. So if you want to quickly see if this system is using get current timestamp versus get host timestamp, you can quickly determine, you can quickly determine, it helps if you can type properly. So get current timestamp is used 9 times, get current host timestamp only 2. Maybe I'll migrate that, maybe I won't, depending upon the architecture of my system. Custom functions. How many of you, show of hands, have migrated a custom function from one system to another and you broke it because it had a dependency on another custom function that you didn't know about? Okay, how about never ever doing that again? So I used the SQL Sugar collection of custom functions. So I can click on this one and say this function calls these functions and it's called by these functions. But the function family spiders up and down the custom function call chain in both directions, drawing a little lasso around every single function that has to move as a single unit for nothing to break. Now in a perfect world, what I'd like to do is move these 4 as a unit. And with FMPerception, you can just right click and say copy for FileMaker. This will load the clipboard with what FileMaker expects, so you can paste all 4 of these custom functions at once, and FileMaker will accept it and not break the definitions of any of them. So you can turn DDRs into copy decks for new systems. This works with anything that FileMaker supports copy and paste for. So tables, fields, scripts, script steps, layout, objects, custom functions, value lists, and the new custom menu copy-paste stuff that was added most recently. Todd used this for disaster recovery at one point, where he was working on a script, made a duplicate of it, made a whole bunch of edits, and when he was done, he was like, now I can delete the old one. And he deletes the old script and then goes, oh no, wait, I still needed that. So it's like, okay, what are you gonna do? You go to the server and try and get a backup, and did you get the right backup, and was the backup? No, wait, I ran a DDR 15 minutes ago. He goes to the DDR, pulls up the script, copies the script, pastes it back into the system. But wait, there were references to that script. So in that old DDR, what are all the references to this script? Now I just have to repoint 3 things, and everything is back where it was. That's an hour's worth of time saved, at least, in trying to reconstruct that, and it just took a couple of minutes. Here are all the global variables in this system and where they're referenced. So 229 uses of this device mode. By the way, particularly those of you who work with junior developers, here's a fun one. Global variables are not case sensitive. So you can type them with whatever case you want and they'll still connect up. I think it's sloppy. So I have a column in there that will show you when this variable was typed with different case. Really good for looking, just to see if somebody's really paying attention to the work that they're doing. here are relationships. And let's see, here's all the self joins. And then there are two different color symbols in this broken column. This yellow one indicates a type mismatch in one of the predicates. So you've got a number field connecting to a text field, or a date to a time, or something like that. Sometimes these have weird behavioral issues, sometimes not. I just want to bring them to your attention. The red ones tell me when things are completely broken, either because the TO that it's supposed to connect to is missing a table, or because the field that was being used for one of the predicates is now missing. And looking at the relationship graph and finding that is very time consuming, but here it's just a second or two. I'm gonna skip down through some of these real quick. You look at themes, and I can say, okay, let's sort these by the number of layouts. Well, here are a bunch of themes that are not being used anywhere. I know this. I can delete these themes if I want to, or I can keep them, or I can track my progress in migrating layouts. Now there's stuff down here for unreferenced objects, indirection sources, broken references, some fun stuff in calculations. And I'm actually not going to look at it for the entire system. I'm going to go back up to layouts. And I want to look at that huge layout, and I want to look at all the calculations on this layout. So every time we come to this layout, 337 calculations run. These are hide conditions, custom formatting, script triggers, all these kinds of things. All these calculations run. And you can look at things like, okay, how many remote TOs do I have to go through to resolve this? So you're trying to chase down what's that one weird thing on this layout that's causing the layout to draw slowly. Here's your answer. Super duper out of time for this stuff because I want to get into some other things. Let me show you a couple slides here. So, demo here. So, advantages of using FMPerception. Getting the data quickly, finding the answers that you need quickly, and more importantly, using current data more often. Okay? Don't use yesterday's DDR. Don't use a week or a month ago DDR. Use today's right now DDR to make sure that you're working with the latest and greatest data. It's an independent application. So when you can always switch over to it, no matter how deep in FileMaker's dialogues you are, if you've got the DDR and FMPerception, you have access to all the information. There's an auto update system, and so I can spit out new versions very quickly and easily. You get a notification, you load the new version, and so whenever I have new features, you can get them immediately, and you can use them immediately because there's no performance penalty to bringing in a new DDR. You don't have to go, well, I'd really like to use the new features, but I've got all this data in an older version of the system, and I don't want to wait for it to migrate. All of these things just make the process of using it smoother and easier. If you're interested, there's a fully functional 14-day trial available on the website. We don't even collect an email address. You go there, you click, you can download it. Separate button for Mac and Windows, fully functional for 14 days. Try it with your DDR. Use your data. See what the performance is really like for you. What does licensing look like? So FMPerception is purchase with support. So when you buy it, you get that version and any version that I release in the next 12 months. So if you were to buy it now and FileMaker stays on their standard pattern, you will automatically get the version of FMPerception that supports FileMaker 19. That's just going to happen. Major, minor versions, doesn't matter. If at the end of 12 months you would like to continue getting updates, the cost is half the total cost of the license, gets you another 12 months of updates. If you don't want to continue paying for support, you can continue using the last version released before your support ended as long as you would like, but you won't be getting updates to that. So you own the software that you're working with. Requires 1010 or higher or Windows 7 or higher. This only works with the new DDR, so it requires FileMaker 12 or more recent. If you're working with FileMaker 11 or have a lot of 11 stuff, another tool might make more sense. Base price, $4.99, that's single user. We effectively license machines. So it's 2 machines that you can run it on. That's desktop, laptop, dev machine, server, or as far as I'm concerned, you and the person in the next cubicle. I'm not picky about that. There are additional larger licenses available for people working in larger teams. There is a discount running right now through about the 16th, and it's 20% off. So that $4.99 price becomes $3.99. Don't wait until Monday to go back to the office, download FMPerception, use it for 2 weeks, and when it says that time is over, then try and get the update, or the discount. It's not gonna run that long, okay? So be a little bit more aggressive about doing your testing with that. Now, I also wanna talk about another application that I'm working on. FMPerception has a diff tool built in, but it hasn't aged exceptionally well. It was built around what I thought people needed diff for, and it turns out people need diff to do a lot different things. So, started working on a new app. This is a companion app for FMPerception called FMComparison. It uses the new XML that FileMaker introduced in FileMaker 18, okay? It is not released yet, but it is going to be entering beta soon, and if you are a licensed user of FMPerception, you'll be invited to join the beta. Once it releases, it will be free if your maintenance is up to date. This is a companion app to FMPerception, not a whole new product line. And let's talk about why. When FileMaker shows diffing with this new XML, they like to use BBEdit. It's fast, it lights up a bunch of differences, and that looks great. The problem is, it is not helpful. It makes a nice demo, it's not useful. Why? So, the first issue is context. If you add a new layout object to a layout that has 300 items on it, when you look at the diff in BBEdit, you'll see that this line is new, but you have to look up 300 to 600 lines of text to find what the name of the layout is that change was made on. Not exceptionally helpful. There's also the fact that if you had a field, the best FileMaker feature, in my opinion, is the ability to rename something and all the references update. But those references contain the field name. So when you export that XML, and if you changed one field name that's used in 100 different places, you're gonna see 100 or 200 changes. You only did one thing, I renamed the field, but every single difference is going to light up. And so FMComparison is working at looking at these limitations of just doing a basic text diff to present you an interface that will allow you to see what really changed, not how the XML changed, but how did the system change. So I got a quick demo here. Let's hide that, close that, hide that. So here is FMComparison. So I can do a new one. Let me blow this up. So let's select an old XML file and a new XML file, and then say compare. And FMPerception lights up. These are added things, these are deleted things, and these are things that have changed. And so I can look and say, okay, here's a layout. What changed in it? By the way, for those of you with older eyes, and if you've ever looked at FMPerception, FMComparison includes font size increases. So this will highlight all the particular things that change. Now this is just looking at the header for the layout, not the layout objects themselves. But this is the direction that FMComparison is going. And over a long enough timeline, this is the direction that FMPerception is going to go. I'm already planning on a new FMPerception that works with the new XML and will allow us to do things like edit the XML in FMPerception. I've identified a problem, can I just fix it right here? With the new XML, over a long enough timeline, yes, we can just fix it right there, export new XML, dump that back into FileMaker and make a whole new database with your changes made. So that's where all of this is trending. That's not there yet. FMPerception uses the old XML, the original DDR, which cannot do that. FMComparison is using the new XML, which means that FMComparison is only going to be helpful to people who are running 18 and higher. But this is where everything's headed. FMComparison, when it is done, will be free for FMPerception users. That's a big thing. This is a companion app to FMPerception, not a new product line. That's getting really close to the end of my time. Let's see, I think I can squeeze in one more thing. Back on FMPerception. This is the report card. It's down in the lower section here, what I describe as slow queries. And slow queries are ones that have to look at large portions of the DDR and cross-reference things to be able to generate data. For example, unreferenced objects. If you want to see the unreferenced scripts, well, first get a list of all the scripts. Second, get a list of every single script reference in the entire system. Then compare and contrast them until you come up with a list of things that don't have any references. That might take a couple minutes. Actually, in this case, it's just a couple seconds. But the report card is particularly slow because it does every single query above it and aggregates all the data into one place. So if you're looking at a system that you've never looked at before, something brand new, this came out of my time as a consultant, I want to be able to see a bunch of data very quickly. So, hey, look, they're not using ESS, no ESS tables. About half of their calculation fields are unstored. The other half aren't. Okay, that might be interesting. Single step buttons. These are buttons on layouts that do something other than perform script. If I see that percentage reaching 99%, I know that I've got a serious maintenance headache coming up. Let's see here. Okay, global variables. So we saw before, there's 97 global variables in the system. But this line is interesting. Those global variables touch 1,400 other objects within the system. In particular, 50% of scripts talk to global variables, which tells me that before I can edit or add scripts to this system, I first have to understand their global variable system, because global variables are critical to the functioning of scripts in this system. Even though I've never seen a line of code, I know this. Let's see here. Here's a fun one, extended privileges. So what does it take to find out if this system is capable of being hit by the REST API? Well, you need a privilege set that's tied to the REST API extended privilege that is also tied to accounts which are active. All three of those things have to be true, but FMPerception does that comparison and tells me there's only one account that can do it, and every item on that report is navigable. I can click on it and get to the list of those things. This is the only account that can do it. Now, this is a single account system, so not really that impressive, but the numbers are still good. Another thing here in accounts, inactive accounts. So accounts that were created but then turned off. This is going to tell me whether somebody is paying attention to these things. Do they have a bunch of privilege sets that don't have any active accounts tied to them? This might be something where somebody needs to do some maintenance, and if you're a consultant, this is a sales opportunity. Additionally, we can say file, export results as HTML content, and this whole document comes out. You can email it, check it into version control, print it to PDF and send it off to a customer, anything like that. It's a really good conversation starter with new and existing customers. So that's about the end of my time. I might have time for one or two questions. Okay, so at this time, FMPerception does not support the ability to make checklists or make notes on things. That's probably actually one of the other things to mention. I've made oblique references to FileMaker-based DDR tools. I love these tools. They're fantastic, but I think that their purpose is different than for FMPerception. Okay, if I had a big 6-month migration coming up, and I was going to be doing a huge amount of work on a big system, I might well load that DDR into Base Elements or Inspector Pro, take a bunch of notes, organize and plan the whole thing. But then when I actually start doing the migration, every single day I'm going to be in FMPerception because I'm doing work, the system is changing, and I need to know what those changes are now, not later and not based upon old stuff. I honestly don't think that the tools compete, and not in a snarky way. I mean, I think they're tools for different purposes. FMPerception is my sidecar. It's running constantly next to FileMaker because it's not much more than a button press or two, or if you want to ask at the booth, I can show you how to script it. A couple of button presses to export a new DDR and get live data. Always be working with that. It will make your development process dramatically smoother. FMPerception will literally change the way you code. I swear. Now, again, I'm going to be at the Geist booth, which is right here. So if you want to see any more of this in detail, ask specific questions, make suggestions, things like that, feel free. If it's your download the trial and play with it, if you have any problems, performance issues, anything like that, support at geistinteractive.com. I'd love to hear about it. And if I can make a fix, I can push that out through the automated update system. Thank you all very much for your time.